Welcome to Alpha300, Introduction to Web Services with Alpha Anywhere. In this course, you're going to learn how to use the Alpha Anywhere platform to both consume and publish web services. Web services, or what's known as web APIs, is the key direction the industry is taking to create more powerful IT and web-based systems. Web services can dramatically improve the functionality and capabilities of your web application. It can also unlock new business opportunities and turn your web application into a true web platform. In this course, we'll be covering the following core topics. The first part is focused on consuming web APIs. You will learn how to locate and identify web APIs to add to your Alpha Anywhere web application, using the curl to XBasic Genie to automatically turn web APIs into XBasic scripts, techniques for extracting the information you want from a web API after it's returned by your XBasic script, and packaging your XBasic scripts for reuse in your applications. The second part is focused on publishing web APIs using Alpha Anywhere. During this section, we will cover creating a data-driven XBasic class to form the basis of your web service, using the XBasic SQL Genie to generate JSON data from your database automatically, creating your web service using the XBasic class, testing your web service using the built-in live testing capability, and then publishing your web service so it can be accessed by systems outside of the Alpha Anywhere development environment. We have also added other web API training information to help you understand the power of adding web APIs to your Alpha Anywhere web application. By the end of this course, you'll be able to confidently consume and create simple web APIs using Alpha Anywhere. As we mentioned in the overview, your first step is to actually locate the web API you would like to consume inside of Apple. As I mentioned in the overview, your first step is to actually discover and find the API that you would like to consume that's going to provide you that business value or business capability. I am going to go to one called mashape.com. It has a number of free resources, and I just picked this one. There's a number of different websites that have API directories that you can search to find. Some are paid, some aren't, so you have to kind of pick and choose what's best for you. So if you'll notice, I'm at the marketplace for mashape.com, and I can go up here to the Search API section, and I'm going to type in the word password since I'm looking for a password strength. So I click that, search it, and then you'll see there's a number of different password vendors that are available. The one I have picked is called Iron Password, but as you can see, there's a lot of different available ones, so you can kind of pick and choose whatever's best for your particular scenario. So I'm going to go ahead and explore this. So I'm going to click on Iron Password, and that takes me into my environment where they give a description of what that specific API is available. So let's go ahead and walk through this screen real quick. First, you'll see we're at the documentation side. On the left-hand side, you'll see that they actually have 3 endpoints that are available for this particular vendor: check, compare, and password gen. And each of these do different things. So for instance, we're on password check. That's the one we're going to use. And you'll see that it checks the strength of a password. But if I go to password gen, you'll see that this actually can generate a password. So as you can see, lots of really cool APIs out there. Since we're doing a password check, I'm going to stay on there. So you'll see we have our endpoint here. You'll notice it gives us a title of what it does. If there were any parameters, they're listed here. So for instance, in this case, there's actually a password we need to pass in. That's a URL parameter. There's also a request header. In this case, they have an API key that you get for free from this marketplace that you pass into it. And I've already logged in, so that's available there. By the way, it's a free account, so you can log in yourself and be able to do that. And again, API keys are used across all types to secure APIs to make sure that just random people can't call those APIs without them knowing who they are. Plus, API keys can be used for billing and other purposes there. So we have on the right-hand side, you'll notice that we have an endpoint definition. You'll notice in this case, it is a get verb, which we use there, which most of them will be, but some are posts, etc., depending on what you're doing there. And you'll notice up top, we have different ways. So you can click these different items and it shows, well, it gives you an example of how you would call this API using Node or PHP or Python. The one we want to use is curl, and that's an industry standard solution, and it's really nice for testing APIs. So you'll notice when I clicked curl here, you'll see that it's put down here a curl example for us. And we can just go ahead and copy that to our clipboard. And that's the key thing, is whenever you're discovering an API, the industry standard is to give you an example of how to call that API in curl. And what's great is when we get to the next step, we're going to actually use Alpha's built-in curl to XBasic to convert that to the XBasic we need to actually call and exercise this API. Note, you can also use that curl in straight ahead in the curl tools and other methods that are associated there. So again, you find the API you're interested in, you find the endpoint you're looking for, and from there you can review the parameters and the headers that it needs, and then you try to locate the curl command and copy that so we can go on to the next step. To test out our web API consumption, we're going to go ahead and create a new empty workspace. So when you launch Alpha anywhere, you'll be presented with the select workspace. You may have some already here, but you can click create a new empty workspace and click OK. I'm going to go ahead and call this consume web API. Oops. And I'm going to go ahead and locate where I store all of my projects and place it here. I'm also going to create workspace directory, so it'll create a directory to hold all of my files for me. Once that's done, it will ask me to here. As a policy, I always click open the web control panel, and you are in the environment. So I'll go ahead and expand our page here. Now, most of the time we stay in the web control panel, but in this case, we're just creating a very quick code sample and function to show how we can consume a web API. So in order to do that quickly and efficiently, we can use the legacy control panel to do so. So you'll notice at the bottom of the screen, there's an area here that is called Control Panel, a tab. You can also navigate to it by using a button up here in the header area. So I'm going to go ahead and click that. Now you're taken to our legacy control panel. And you can see it's active by the tab being first up front versus the web projects control panel. And you'll notice there's a series of tabs that are available in the control panel. I'm going to go ahead and click Code. This is where we can create little scripts to do testing, verification, any number of uses, and in case we're going to use from here. So what I'd like you to do is click the New button. This will bring up a drop-down window, and what we would like to use is script using XBasic editor. And you'll notice that it opens up a editing area for us to create our new script. And currently it is untitled since we have not saved it. And you'll notice on the right-hand side, we're given a lot of little helpers. This is your code library where you can see different commands that are available. Very nice to have available at any one time. So for us to consume our web API, we're going to use a really powerful function built into Alpha called the curl to XBasic genie, which basically takes that curl command and it turns it into XBasic. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the white space in my editor. I'm going to go to Genies, and then I'm going to go down to curl command to XBasic and click there. This then opens up the curl to XBasic genie. You'll notice that there is an area to insert your curl command. So that curl command that I copied from the Web API Explorer in my web browser, I'm going to go ahead and paste it here. And you'll notice to paste all the fields that are there. Once I've pasted it there, I'm going to click Generate XBasic. And in a few moments, Alpha will make a test call to that service. They'll identify all the different things that it needs, and we now have our XBasic here created for us. And I'm going to go ahead and copy that code to the clipboard. Then I'm going to click OK. And you'll notice that it automatically pasted here, but it's copied in case I need that at a future period of time. So we can actually test this right now by making one quick change. You'll notice that it's already put in the header information and our URL. So I'm just going to put in a password here. You'll notice it says required, and I'll go test password. Just because we're going to feed it, this is what the password is going to be checked. And in our next section, we'll walk through this in a little more detail to show you what's going on. I'm going to go ahead and save this, and I'm going to go call password strength, and that's the name of this script. Once I click OK, you'll see call password strength is up here. I'm going to now click the lightning bolt, which will run this script. This will execute the XBasic, and you'll see it brings back some information here. You'll notice it's showing headers. We don't have any header information, but you'll notice it says here content, and here is all the content information that came back from our call. And most importantly, you'll notice there's an area here in curly brackets. It's a JSON structure that says the strength of our password is good. So our next section, we're going to go ahead and walk through this code a little bit more, show you what's going on. But more importantly, we're going to figure out how to extract just the information we need from the call that was made. Our next step is to extract the information we want from the API. As you saw earlier, it returns a lot of data, and we need to determine what we want and how to efficiently extract that to then be used by our application. So what I like to do is just to give you a little familiarity of what's going on in this script. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go to line 1, and I am going to put in a debug. And if you're new to XBasic, XBasic has a full-blown debugger built into it. And by inserting the statement debug 1, i.e. debug true, it will trigger the debugger. And so we can walk through this code step by step and kind of discuss what it does. So to run it, I'm going to click the lightning bolt. As you can see, it has now opened up our debugger here. This is a floating window on top of our script. And as you can see, after it reached the debug, it stopped here. So Alpha has a built-in extension called curl file, which knows how to run curl commands. And actually what it does is it takes all this information, generates a curl command, executes it, and then returns the value from there. So I'm going to step through these. You'll see on line 5, we're basically passing into a list, or actually a pointer array, the API key. And this is the API key that was given to me by that API site. Now, as you can see on line 8, they've initialized the curl extension called CE. And now the next thing it's going to do is put in the URL. And if you'll notice, this is the endpoint for our API, including the password we want it to be tested. The rest here is doing some other setup items here. So I'm going to step through them very quickly. And then on line 20, it takes all this information and actually executes the curl command as we've set it up. So you'll see there's a slight delay, and then it will go to the next step. Now, in this, we detect whether the command was successful or not by storing a flag. If it's true, everything's good to go. If it's false, then there was an error and we could track that. So we checked that. In our case, it returned OK. Now we're going to use some built-in commands to get the headers that came back from the web API call and the contents. And this mimics a web page. In a web page, you may not know it, but behind the scene, there's a header that has a whole bunch of information that tells the web browser what's coming to it. And then you have the contents, which is really the body, which in the case of a web page, it would be then the HTML, CSS, JavaScript, everything else you need from that standpoint. In our case, you'll see that we take a step here, and actually I can take a look at what's in the headers. So I'm going to go move this up here, and I'm going to double click on headers. Well, as you can see, no header information was returned. So this particular web API, there's no header data. Other APIs, you may see that. But let's look at the contents. So I'm going to double click on here, and you'll notice that the contents includes a bunch of information. But most importantly, if I scroll down, in here, it has some JSON, and inside there it has what we're looking for, which is the strength of our password. So one of the challenges is when you do an API, sometimes they're really nice. They just come back with content ready to go. But in our case, we need to do a little bit more work to kind of extract out of there the specific piece of information we're interested in. And you'll see when I click step, then it does what's called a show var, which actually shows that. Then I can now close my debugger, and you can see that same information is just being presented here. So we're going to make a few changes here. The first thing I want to do is when I get the contents back, what I'm interested in is getting the items that are within the curly brackets. And that's what's important for me in my situation here. So what I'd like to do in this case is use a built-in command that's built into Alpha that allows us to extract that information. So one thing I want to point out while I'm here is I'll go Help, Open Documentation. This will launch in our web browser the Alpha documentation site. And this is where you can find all these different functions and other capabilities here. And I'm going to go ahead and type in here the following, extract, because I want to extract a string from it. And in fact, there's a really nice function in here called extract underscore string. Oh, maybe you have to be a little more specific. There we go. Here's the extract string function. And so this gives all the data about it. Basically what it does is it extracts some part of a string from another string. So that's one we want. And again, my key goal here is to show you that all of this is online in our documentation site and you can review it from there. So let's go back into our script and let's go ahead and use that function. So what I want to do is I want to first extract everything in those curly brackets. So I'm going to go here to contents and I'm going to go contents is equal to extract. And notice that it actually has code complete. So it shows how to complete that code. So it, when I'm looking up functions, I make sure to spell them correctly. Okay. So the string we want to pass in, sort of the large string, is called contents because we're going to extract it out of there. Then it's asking me what the starting point is to look for. So this is another string that it's going to look for. And we know in our case, it's the curly bracket. And then you'll see there's the end string. Well, we also know in there is an end curly bracket, so I'm going to go ahead and do that. So now we've told it that we want to extract everything between those two characters, the beginning curly bracket, the end curly bracket. And depending on your scenario, maybe a little different, depending on that web API and the information comes back. Now I want to do one other thing here, which is I want to extract the first occurrence of it, and I also want to include the tags, meaning I actually want to include the brackets along with it. So I'm going to go true to there. So this basically says, look in contents, find where that beginning and ending is, and then once you have that, extract it from there. So let's go ahead. I'm going to take my debug here. I'm going to grab that, copy it, and I'm going to put it right here since we can just start debugging after it's made the call. I'm going to save my script and run it. Now you'll notice that it found the debug. It stopped it there. You'll notice the contents is currently the whole amount of information. And if I step, you'll see now, contents has just the information we're looking for, which is the JSON between the beginning and ending there. And I can actually see it here. So I'm going to break here. And in the next, we're going to figure out how to then take the next step of extracting out of here the actual strength element. And we're also going to go ahead and wrap this all up into a function. So in the future, if we ever need to reuse this, it's going to be very simple to do so. We've taken our first step. So we have a JSON string that's available to us. There's a really neat feature inside Alpha. Alpha really understands how to use JSON. And there's a lot of built-in functionality that you can use to extract information and translate JSON into other formats that make it easier to work with. So in our case, we're going to use one of those built-in functions. And so follow along. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to stop my debugger here since we know everything's working. I'm going to return back here. So at this point on line 28, I have the contents are what I'm looking for. That JSON string is right there. So now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go dim result pointer as P. So what we're defining here is what's called a pointer. And a pointer is a very powerful variable type inside of Alpha that makes it easy to work with complex data. Then what I'm going to do is I'm going to say result pointer is equal to JSON underscore parse contents. So what I'm going to do is take that JSON that came back and I'm going to run it through this command called JSON parse. And when you do that, it turns it from a set of text into what's called a result pointer, which or a pointer, which is much easier to work with. So I'm going to go ahead and I'll leave my debug in there. I'm going to click save and let's take a look at how this works. So I'm going to click the lightning bolt button to execute this. Now we're at this point, I'll step, and now you'll notice we have the contents. Now I'm dimensioning my result pointer. And if I go in there, and you'll see at this point, there's nothing inside the result pointer. It's an empty pointer. Then I'm going to click step, and you'll notice, it now has taken this content and made it into a result pointer. So as you can see, it's taken each of these elements, upper count, unique count, etc., and turned them into separate items. So it's basically parsed our JSON for us. Makes life easier. So I'm going to click here on strength, and you'll notice if I want to get just the strength, all I have to do is get this variable right here. So I'm going to go ahead and copy that variable name here onto the clipboard. And I'm going to go ahead and run this. And currently it's still showing me the headers and content. So I'm going to click OK. So now what I'd like to do is I'm going to go show var, and I'm going to paste that result pointer. And I'm going to go ahead and comment out this part here because I don't need that anymore. So the idea is this will run, it will parse that piece of text, and then out of that parsed text, I can grab that piece of information. I'm going to go ahead and take off the debug one too, so we can just see what run. So I'm going to click save, run it, and now you'll notice the only thing that's coming back or being shown is that password strength. Really working well. So as you can see, a key part of the process is once you have the web API working, you'll get some result back. You need to figure out what to do with that result and how to extract the information that you need. Now, we're going to do one last thing just to make this really powerful. I want to reuse this over and over and over again. So I don't want to have to paste all this content or all this code into every time I want to do something like this. So I'm going to turn this into a function. And a function is a built-in XBasic capability. So I'm going to go function password strength. Okay, and then I'm going to go to the bottom here, and I'm going to put here end function. So I've basically wrapped all my code into what's called a function here. And I actually want to pass in the password that I want to check. So I'll go password to check as C. So basically this function will have a parameter I'll pass in called password to check, and then it will check that password. Now, since I'm passing in this password to check, we need to go down and actually look at line 10, because you'll notice currently the password is hard-coded to what we have right here. So I can change that really quickly by just going here, deleting the hard-coded password. I'm leaving in the password equals, and then I'm just using a plus, which is concatenative text, with the password to check. So now when this runs, it's going to combine this string with the password to be able to run it. So I can go up here. I'm going to go here, and I'm going to go show var. Actually, let's type this here. I'll go dim password strength is as C, so that's a character. And I'm going to go password strength is equal to password strength, the function, and I'm going to pass in this case, test password. So what I'm basically doing is, I guess my naming is a little, let's call this password string text, so it doesn't have the same name as the function. But basically what I'm going to do is call the function, pass in my password I'd like to test, and then that will put the result here, and then I can go show var password string text. So when this runs, this script here will run. When it gets to this point, it's going to go in here and run this code to do it. So let's give that a test. So I'm going to click here, and you'll notice, boom, it worked. It ran this function with this test password, and it put in the show var here. In fact, we can try that with something differently here by going in here and maybe going, let's make it interesting. That looks like a little bit more of a stronger password than we had before. So let's see how efficient this password checker is. So now I'm at a medium level of strength. So you can see that now I have a function that I can reuse over and over again anywhere I need to that's going to leverage my web API. And in fact, I don't really need to know about the web API. I now have a function in my my toolkit that allows me to do this anywhere I want to. And that's one of the true powers, is you can encapsulate all this functionality and make it very simple to implement in your solutions by using this method. Now, one other note, I'm going to go ahead and go here. You'll notice that I have hard-coded my API key in the actual function here. Most likely, I'd probably want to add another function or another parameter to my function where I pass that in, or I might store that as what's called a web repository item and use that there. So there's different methods on there, but what you have to do is kind of genericize this. So given any situation, for instance, you may provide this function to someone else and they may have a different password API key that they need to use. Well, instead of hard coding it, you can make that a variable element that they can pass into the function and be successful with. Our first step for our introduction to web publishing is to set up our project workspace. So to do so, launch Alpha Anywhere. Once it's launched, you can go to the File, New Workspace. Click that. This will open up a Create New Workspace dialog box. So I'm going to go ahead and give our workspace name, which is Intro to Web Publishing. And then you'll notice the second item is workspace location. This is where it's actually going to save that workspace. So I'm going to go ahead and click Browse here. And on my particular machine, I'm going to go into my documents, and I've created a folder in my documents called Alpha Anywhere V12. I'm going to select that. Now, you'll notice there's an option called Create Workspace Directory, and we want to use that because what it will do is it will create a folder for us and then put all of our new files in that folder. So with workspace name set, our target location set, and Create Workspace Directory, click OK. You'll notice it'll ask me which startup control panel we would like. I always select Open the Web Control Panel when this workspace is open because most of your work will be done in the Web Control Panel. If you want, you can click Never Display this dialog when first opening Web Projects Control Panel in any workspace so that it doesn't ask you in the future times. But I'm going to leave that unchecked for now, and I'm going to go ahead and click OK. This will open up our new workspace. You'll see that we're at the Web Projects Control Panel. I'm going to go ahead and expand that, and we are now ready to add our files and start building our solution. In order to demonstrate, we need to set up a connection string. I'm going to go ahead and select Tools, Alpha DAO Connection Strings. This will open up our Alpha DAO Connections dialog box. You'll notice since this is a new project, there are no connection names located here. One thing that's nice is that Alpha has taken the time to go ahead and include some basic capabilities so we can quickly create a connection string to a sample database. If you look down at the lower left corner, you'll see there's a set of blue highlighted text called Create AA Demo-Northwind Demo Connection String. Go ahead and click that. This will bring up a help window to describe what is going on. And in our case, everything's set up and ready to go. So we just need to click the OK, create a name connection string called AA Demo-Northwind. You'll notice then it gives us a confirmation notice saying that the connection string has been set up. Click OK, and there is our new connection string. I'm going to go ahead and click Edit here to show you a little more details. And then I'm also going to click the Build button to show you what it is. In this case, the default connection string is a Microsoft Access database that is included in the installation for Alpha Anywhere. And in fact, you can see that it found my Alpha Anywhere installation directory and it found a Access database Northwind MDB. So this is just handy if you're doing any quick and dirty kind of prototyping or testing. You can just create this connection string and have it available. I'm going to go ahead and click OK and OK. And at this point, I'll click Close, and we are done with creating our connection string. To help us get started, notice there's a button called Insert in the tab bar at top. Go ahead and click Insert, and you'll notice there is a second item called Class Definition. Go ahead and click Class Definition. you'll notice that it inserts some default text for a class. So this is a nice little starter to kind of show you the structure of how a class is defined. So you'll notice there's a definition line here. And then down below, we have some example code. First, where we dimension a sample variable and also a sample method. Just to help us, so when I'm describing what we're doing, I'm going to go ahead and right-click on the white area here, and I'm going to go down to the bottom and select line numbers. You'll notice now in our editor, we now have line numbers on the left side of the screen. So this just makes it easy when you're conversing with someone else to say, hey, check out line 12 where we dimension the sample variable. You'll notice on line 5 that we're defining the class. And the class actually has a name that consists of two parts called my namespace and my sample class. In this case, what we want to do is I'm going to go ahead and type in for my namespace alpha, and then for my class, I'm going to call it Northwinds. The reason we use both a namespace and a class name, alpha is the namespace, Northwinds is the other, the actual class name, is because often when you're distributing code and working with other people, they may actually have created classes with similar names. And so this just gives us a way to kind of further define and say, oh, this Northwinds is actually associated with my particular namespace, just as a nice little tool from that standpoint there. Let's go ahead and save this at this point so we have it saved to our drive. Click the Save button in the left-hand corner. You'll notice that since we have gone ahead and defined the class with the namespace and the text for the class name, it automatically inserts the file name here, which is alpha.northwinds. And then A5XB class, which is the file type that Alpha uses for classes. Go ahead and click Save. Now, let's go ahead and start cleaning up our class a little bit. First, I'm going to erase line 12. We don't really need that in this case. All we're really going to do is have a single method in our class that is going to return a set of product information from our Northwinds database, i.e. the connection string that we created a little while earlier. So I'm going to go here to sample method 1, and I'm going to highlight that text, and I'm going to type in return products. And this is now the name of our new function here. And in class terminology, that's called a method that we're creating here. Now you'll notice here that since we changed the function name, we're going to actually have to change what's called the return. Now this is just demo kind of text for right now, but it's good practice to go ahead and say, okay, I'm going to copy return products, and I'm going to highlight and overwrite this right here. So two things real quick is that in the function, the return is actually character. So in our case, it's going to be some JSON that is a set of products. In order to actually return that out of the function, we need to return whatever text we want to the name of the function. So that's why we have return products is equal to, and in this case, some dummy text for here. Let's go ahead and save our class. And we're now ready to move on to the next step where we're actually going to go ahead and inside this function, develop the code to call our database, pull some information out, and turn that into JSON that will be returned by this function as our web service. And you'll see in a little bit, that's a very straightforward process with Alpha Anywhere with a lot of built-in capabilities. The purpose of our web service is to return a set of products from a database, specifically one of the tables in the database. In this case, what we want to do is add some XBasic code to actually query the database and return that information. And more importantly, we need to make sure that that information is formatted as JSON, JSON, so that it is returned in the proper format that the web service should provide. One of the coolest things is XBasic has some really nice built-in functionality to help make this easy. So, follow along. I'm going to go ahead and position my mouse above where I'm returning the products. In this case, I'm now at line 16, so I'm going to put that on line 15. I'm going to right-click and then go down to Genies, and you'll notice a genie called XBasic SQL Actions Code Generator and go ahead and click. This will open up an XBasic SQL Genie. This is a nice feature that will allow you to write XBasic code without actually needing to know how to write that code. Actually, the system will write it for you. So the one I would like is the first one here, which is query a SQL database to get JSON data. We do have other ones we'll explore in future trainings, basically the ability to do an update, an insert, a delete, any kind of action you want on a SQL database. So I'm going to click on Query a SQL Database to get JSON data and click OK. First thing I'm going to do is go to the connection string, and I'm going to select the connection string by clicking on the ellipsis button. This will open up our connection string dialog box. We have our AA demo-Northwind, which I'll select. You'll notice it will fill it in here, and I'll click OK. The method we want is just fields from a table. By the way, if you want, you can also use and create a custom SQL query right here within the system. I'm going to click on table name and open that up. This gets a list of tables, and if I want to see views, I can click this button right here. It'll show me both. But in our case, we're just looking for a product information from the product table. So find the product table in your list here called products and click OK. This now tells that we're going to be generating that SQL command against that specific table. Now it's asking me the fields from that table, so I'll click the ellipsis button here. And in this case, I'm going to go ahead and select all of the fields. For our purposes, we want to get all the data in that database. In your case, and depending on your business use case, you may not need all the fields. It really depends on what you're doing as far as building your web API. Click OK. You'll notice that immediately down below, it's starting to build my XBasic command. You can go ahead and set a filter. We're not going to do that now, but you could filter it with arguments. So in this case, you could make it a far more dynamic web service where you can basically put input parameters and then kind of clarify what you want back. You can also set order, distinct, and limits, etc. Behind the scenes, it's actually generating the SQL query for you. In fact, you can see that right here. In our case, it's a very simple select of from the product table. So you'll see right here, we have our XBasic code. A nice feature is that if we ever need this setting in the future, you can save these settings and restore them without having to go through and click. Very important, especially if you have arguments and filter criteria. Next, I'm going to go ahead and copy the code to the clipboard. But before I do that, I actually want to test this and make sure it works properly. So click the test link down below here, and you'll notice that it runs a SQL command. It pulls a list of all of the products in that table, and more importantly, it formats it as JSON for me. So click OK. I'm going to copy that code to the clipboard. This is a confirmation notice to say that that's been done, and click OK. Now I can click the close button here to close this. Now that I'm back into my editor, I can simply right-click and paste that code I just created. And what I like to do is just to format it cleanly, I'm going to highlight all that code that's been pasted, and I'm going to use a little nice function up here called the indent function. And I can indent that, and this will make it nicely line up inside my code. So now, very exciting, all of this code was written for me. I just pointed and clicked, and it's going to work great. It's very reliable, and it's a great way to go in terms of rapidly generating your solution. We have one last thing we need to do, and that's the following. You'll notice that in our code, basically it makes a connection to the database, creates a SQL query, runs that SQL query, and then most importantly on my line 40, actually line 41, you'll see that it takes the result set, the information that came back from the query, converts it to JSON, and puts it into this JSON parameter there. So now I'm going to scroll down to my line 46, and remember this is the name of my function, and I want to return to that name of the function whatever I've generated within that function. So I'm going to highlight the text right here, and I'm going to just put in JSON. So what will happen is the XBasic will call the database, grab the data, format it, and then I just return it to there. And now I've selected my JSON, and more importantly, I've selected my table, and it's generating the right JSON, and I have my new class up and operating correctly. Click the save icon to save this, and now we're ready to move on to the next step. Now that we have our class ready to go, we can now wrap that in a web service. First step is to return to the Web Projects control panel. Then click on the Web Services icon in the list on the left. You'll notice at this time we don't have any web services. Click the New button in the left corner. You'll be presented with a new service type. There, we can consume both SOAP and also REST services. In our case, we want to create a definition to create a REST service versus consuming a REST service. So consuming would be calling an outside service and pulling that data in. In our case, we're actually going to publish the data out. So click Create a New Definition to create a REST service. This will open up our REST API Service Builder, and it's currently titled Untitled since we don't have it ready to go yet. So we'll follow from the top down. Our first step is to add a class that will be part of this web service. So click Add New Class. This will give us a list of classes that are in our workspace. In our case, we only have one class, and we click OK. And you'll notice the moment we do that, two things here. The Remove Class is enabled in case we need to get rid of it. We can also click Edit Class here to open it up and do any modifications we would like. You'll also notice since Alpha Northwinds is selected, the available methods within that class are shown. In our case, we only have one called Return Products, but it's available right here. And if there were any arguments associated with Return Products, which we'll cover in a future training, they would show up here. One thing to note is that we only have one class in this very simple demonstration, but you may have a much more sophisticated system. And what's neat is you can actually wrap multiple classes in a single web service. This actually brings a lot of efficiencies to your structure and your documentation. A couple other things I want to note before we move on to the next step. First, you'll see up in the right-hand corner, we have two options for this class. One is called Require Authentication for Selected Methods. That would enable our ability to add authentication to protect our classes and, more importantly, our web service. And you'll see that in most APIs, you'll have a key or a token that's needed to actually be able to exercise that web service. We're not going to cover that in our training here, but it's nice to know that that's built into the system. Another area that's really nice is that you have the ability to also audit the API. This allows you to add your own code to trap when people are connecting to your web service. You can trap that information and store it. This is great for security, management, billing, all those kind of elements there. So with Return Products selected here, you'll notice that it is currently red. That means we have not exposed this method for use. It's been selected, it will be part of this web service, but nobody will be actually able to use it till we actually expose that. In order to do that, click Edit Method or Edit Method Properties. By the way, you notice there's a little key down here that says, in our case, the method is not exposed in this service. Once we go through the next step, you'll see it goes green. They also have little keys for whether it's authenticated or public, meaning it's unauthenticated. So I'll click Edit Method Properties. This will open up our Return Products method properties. In our case, we want to expose this, so I'm going to click this checkbox. You'll notice now that it gives me some options because there are different ways to expose a API. You'll notice there's a little help box you can click right here to get more information on how that works. In our case, we're going to use what's called a get REST verb. It's a very simple one. It's the basic one. Basically, it's the idea if someone says, hey, get me this information, comes back. But Alpha supports the post, delete, update, and put, which are other types that are used for more advanced scenarios. So select Git. You'll notice the path is the same name as the method, which we'll leave here. But if you want to, you can modify this. So you can kind of have internal names and external APIs. And that's kind of important because down the road, you may have a situation where you rename a bunch of things or refactor your API internally, but you want to maintain a certain naming structure on the outside world. You'll notice currently that this authenticated is unchecked. We're going to leave that unchecked. But if you did need to authenticate this, you could go ahead and enable that and go through that process. Click OK. And now you'll notice that our return products is enabled, i.e. there's a green icon here that says the method is exposed. Next to it is a lock that's unlocked, which means that it's a public, not authenticated. And there we go. We've built our first REST service. Now in our next section, we're going to cover how we live test that right here to make sure it's working properly. Now that we have our XBasic class and we've wrapped it in our web service, we can actually test it right within this interface. To do so, click the Live Test the API right here. What that will do is it will create a test page for us and launch that in our web browser. Note, if your server isn't started, it's going to ask you to start your server because it's going to run it on the local machine here. Now that it has opened up the test page located in your web browser, and this will use your default web browser, you'll see a Swagger test page. This is an industry standard format for the OpenAPI spec. And if you're interested, you can go to swagger.io to learn more about the OpenAPI spec and the tools that are available to you. So you'll notice, and it's a little hard to see here, but you'll see that we are working in a live preview. This is the temporary name of the service it has created. And it creates a API docs, which show you the API docs. So this is all temporary information just randomly generated so that you can use it right away. But you'll notice right down here, you'll see that our return products module / method is available. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. Notice it's showing us the get verb that we used for this. So I'm going to go ahead and click on that. When you do that, it will go ahead and expand this area here. Note you might have multiple in future development, so you'll see multiple rows with the different verb in front of it. You'll notice that there are no parameters we're using at this time. Down the road, if you start adding where you can submit arguments into your web services, you'll see that there. You'll see the response is currently application/JSON. That means that the kind of data coming back is JSON. And you'll see that the responses are right here. And that's 200, which is a successful request. So we click this button right over here called Try It Out. That will change the user interface. You'll notice that it added a execute button here. So we're going to go ahead and click execute. You'll notice that it is currently calling the web API and exercising that. I'm going to go ahead and scroll down a bit here. So you'll see the response code is 200, meaning it was successful. You'll also see the response body, what was delivered back from the call, has the JSON data with all of our product information in there. So you'll notice that we have our first product here, our second product, and on and on and on. So this allows us to test immediately within a web browser without having to go through a lot of different methods to get this to work, meaning we can quickly see, yes, it looks right. It's responding. It's got the right data that's coming back. One other thing that's really nice is that if I scroll up a little bit, as a standard, it actually provides the curl command. And we'll be covering this in future training, the curl tool. It allows you to exercise your web APIs on a command line without having to write a whole bunch of code. It's really a handy tool. And you'll notice that it wrote an example curl command. You'll see that it's using our live preview temporary page here, or really our temporary service here. And you can use this in any kind of tool that supports curl. It's very, very handy. In fact, you can take curl and turn it into different languages. So PHP, JavaScript, etc. There are methods to take that curl command and turn it into code that other people can use to exercise your web service. So this is a quick and effective way for us to test out our web service without even having to save it, publish it, etc. But we're going to go ahead and close this out. And we're back into our development environment. I'm going to go ahead and click Save. You'll notice that it's asking me what the name of this service would be. So I'm going to go ahead and call it Northwinds because that's the top level sort of I want for this. You can name it anything you want, but try to maintain a naming convention that's consistent and click Save. Now that's been saved and I can go ahead and cancel to close it out. When I cancel when we're out, you'll see under Web Services, we now have our Northwind service, and that is what we're going to be using to publish and exercise the system. Now that we've created our web service, tested it to make sure it's okay, we can now implement that within our solution. And in fact, we can create our own test page, and the important reason to do that is that it will use all the proper naming conventions to make it easy for us to test with external tools. So the first thing I'm going to do is reopen our Northwinds A5 SVC, which is A5 service file. You'll notice that down below there is a Create a Test API page for your project. So I'm going to click that. It brings up a confirmation dialog box. I'm going to click Create API Test Page. It is going to ask me what is the name of that page. And for our purposes, since this is such a small little project, I'm going to type index because I want it to be that primary page. And I'm going to click Save. This will confirm that the page has been created, and I click OK. And then I can cancel out of here. Now, if I go to the A5W pages, you will now see that my index page is now available. Now, to exercise this page, I would like to go ahead and run it on my local machine. So I'm going to do a local publish and run it on my machine. But what I want to do is make sure that it's going to publish it into a directory so I don't overwrite anything else in my system. So to confirm that, I'm going to click up here on Profiles. That will open up our local web root. And I'm going to go here under Target Folder, and I'm going to go API Publish. And I'll call that API Publish. So what this will do is create a folder for my files on my local system, and I won't overwrite any other projects that I have going. So I'm going to click OK. Now that I've set up my proper profile, I can actually do the publish step. So to do so, I'm going to click here on Publish. This will open up our web project publishing dialog box. I actually want to publish all files in the project. This will include both our index and our service file. I would like to automatically open up my page for me, so I'm going to click Launch Browser after files are published, and the page to show will be index.a5w, and click OK. Now that I've done that, I can click the Publish button. This will show me a list of files that are going to be published. You'll notice it's not only publishing the index page, but all the other associated required files to make all this work. And then I'm going to click OK. Now, this is the first time I published for this particular project, so it's going to ask me, do I want to create this folder where it's going to publish those files? And I want to say yes. You'll notice now that it's publishing the files, basically copying them into a folder. It gives me a confirmation message that that has been completed, so I will click OK. And now you'll notice that it opens up in our default web browser our test page. So you'll notice we have our server here and the index page that it's published. So to do it, you'll see right here I've got Northwinds. I'm going to click on that. And this shows my Northwinds service endpoint. Now, very important, notice the base URL here. This will become very important because this shows me exactly where I call to exercise this service when published on my local machine. You'll see this looks identical to that test environment we did before, so I can click Get, I can click Try It Out, and Execute just to make sure everything's working perfectly. And if I scroll down here, you'll see here's my response body, which has all the information. I'm getting a response code of 200. So this is also a nice way to publish this. What's also good is this is industry standard documentation. So you can actually provide this to a person and they can try out your API right there within their web browser. Pretty nice. You can just give them this URL location and they can go to that from there. But now I want to show you one other thing. And what we're going to do is show you a modern technique on how to test out these APIs, but without having to create a test page, etc. So what I'm going to do is, the first thing I'm going to do is copy this URL here, which is localhost:1580 API publish Northwinds A5 service. And I'm going to right click on that and copy that. Now, I use a tool, and there's multiple different tools out there that are available, called Postman. And again, there's multiple tools. You can pick whichever one you want, but they're very valuable tools to have in your toolkit. So I'm going to click Postman. This will open up the Postman system. You'll notice when Postman loads up, we have a landing page / landing window. I'm going to go ahead and close that for now. And so we're at the Postman interface. So you'll see up top, this is where we define the kind of request we need to make. And you'll notice it defaults to GET, but they also support the other items that we may need. In fact, they have a lot more that's available. So I'm going to leave it on GET. I'm going to paste our URL in here. So you'll notice we're going to do a GET to our URL here. It is the server name, the folder I published to, and the actual service itself. Now, this is just the service. What we actually need to do is call our method on that service. So I'm going to scoot this down a little bit, and you'll notice that our service is actually that URL with /return products. So I'm going to go down here. I'm going to go /return products. And once I've done that, I'll go ahead and move this back to the center so we can see it. So this is the full URL, including the server, the folder, the service itself, and then specifically which method within that service we have exposed that we'd like to exercise. And now we've done that, we can click Send. You'll see that it actually is calling to that service. Here's a history of it right here. And voila, here is our results. So you can see in here, here's the body of what was returned by this URL. And in our case, it's our list of products in JSON format. What's nice is now you don't have to open up a web page or anything else. If you ever need to test or exercise this, you can just open it up in Postman. You can save these. It becomes a very handy tool, especially as you grow in size and scope. There's also a whole series of testing capabilities built into these tools. For instance, you could test this and have it automatically compare what came back. So you're going to find there's a lot of really neat utilities around the whole web API area here. So that kind of covers our ability to test it. We can either use a built-in test page that is created by the system that you publish and then manage yourself. It's also handy to be able to provide this for other people for documentation purposes. And you can use a third-party tool. In this case, I'm using Postman, but you can pick and choose what you would like to then also exercise that web API and see what the results are here. And you'll notice there's a lot of other information that is given back during the process that will help you in terms of your testing, validation, and making sure everything works perfectly. Thank you so much for taking the Alpha300 Introduction to Web Services with Alpha Anywhere course. In the first part of this training, we focused on consuming web APIs. We covered how to locate and identify web APIs to add to your Alpha Anywhere web application, using the curl to XBasic Genie to automatically turn web APIs into XBasic scripts, techniques for extracting the information you want from the web API after it's returned from your XBasic script, and packaging your XBasic scripts for reuse in your applications. In the second part, we covered publishing web APIs using Alpha Anywhere. The topics covered were creating a data-driven XBasic class to form the basis of your web service, using the XBasic SQL Genie to generate JSON data from your database automatically, creating your web service using the XBasic class, testing your web service using the built-in live testing capability, and publishing your web service so it can be accessed by systems outside of the Alpha Anywhere development environment. Your next step in your Giant Killer training is our more advanced courses. If you'd like to learn about the advanced grid techniques, you can take Alpha 103, Advanced Grids with Alpha Anywhere. If you would like to focus on the UX component to build powerful web forms, you can take Alpha 104, Advanced UX Components with Alpha Anywhere. These courses are built to be taken in any order as you see fit.